welcome to the Production Talk podcast with me, Yarn of mixartist.com.au. In this podcast series, we celebrate the modern way of producing music. We want to talk about all things related to songwriting, recording at home, and music production. So if you produce your music at home, this is the place to be. Please subscribe and recommend this podcast to all your friends. This is the Production Talk podcast, episode 26. Welcome everybody to the final episode of 2021. Merry Christmas to every one of you. It is great to have you on board today for the final episode. And to finish up this year on a high note, I would like to announce a very special interview today. I was really lucky to get time with one of the UK's leading music producers and recording artists. He has worked with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra as well as top charting artists. He has worked for Sony, Sky TV, Nuclear Blast Records, and so on and so on. And I'm very glad to announce that he is with me today for the final episode of the year. So let's cut straight to the good stuff. Here's my interview with Russell Cottier. Thank you so much for making time today. It's the very first time that I'm actually doing an interview with a guest overseas. So far all the interviews were all here in Australia. And, I've done interviews with overseas people before, but not for this podcast. Sure. So that's a premiere, which is fantastic. So really glad to have you on board. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. Is that right?
It's 11 in sunny England, yes. Yeah.
In sunny England, okay.
It's so sunny it's winter. And,
it's winter,
It is as you would expect.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've lived in that general area of the world before, and can be quite miserable, yeah. You've got a cup of tea going. For me, it's late at night. It's quarter.
I'm so British. I'm so British. I have to have a cup of tea at all times. That's an absolute requirement.
For me, it's a bit later. So
studio.
I hope you can forgive me. I'm having a glass of red wine because it's past 10 p.m. at this stage.
Well, I'm on decaf after 3 p.m. now, so decaf tea.
Yeah, not a bad idea, actually. That's actually not a bad idea.
Definitely. Stops you working all night, which is a good thing.
Good. Russell, first tell us a little bit more about yourself, please. Do you want to just, talk about who you are, what you've done musically, and what your passion is?
Oh, do I have a passion? Yes. Okay, so I'm a record producer. I'm based in the UK, in the northwest, near Liverpool. As I look out of my studio, I'm on the first floor, or sort of the first floor up, not the ground floor, and I can see right across the River Mersey over to Liverpool. So I'm in the sort of the epicenter of UK music, as it were.
Wow.
Certainly the history of UK music. Which is nice. I'm a record producer. I've been doing this for nearly 20 years. I started as an engineer in a local studio and sort of built up from there. And I do a lot of educational stuff. So I'm an ambassador for Harrison Mixbus. I run a YouTube channel. I have an electronics company where we make hardware controllers. What else do I do? Oh, just so much stuff. I think that basically covers me. I mean, I've worked with all sorts of people. From one day I'll be doing a record in someone's living room, and the next day I'll be in a studio with a Grammy Award-winning artist or number one artists or whatever. So it's quite a varied lifestyle. And I just try and make records that are really fun and interesting. So that's my kind of main goal, really, when I'm producing.
Excellent. Let me just maybe clarify, because not everybody might know about Harrison Mixbus. It's a DAW, or digital audio workstation. What's special about it? What do you like about it so much?
Okay, so I was fortunate enough to be old enough to grow up on the end of the tape era. So digital recording and digital mixing were just coming in when I started in the industry. Well, I say just coming in. They were coming into more regional studios. Obviously, the big London studios have been doing this for 4 or 5 years. But, at the point where I came into the industry, the studios I was working in, we were still using analog mixing. We were still using analog tape. So I started off on 16-track 1-inch and a big AMEC console and Tannoy Golds and all that kind of stuff. So that's how I kind of got into things and learned to experience mixing music. As I moved on to working in the box more, which is great, absolutely fantastic, I was finding that I wasn't getting the sound that I wanted. And I ended up having a sort of a default setup where I would drop an SSL plugin channel strip onto every input channel. I would have some kind of saturator on all my buses.
Yep. I
would maybe run into a compressor plugin. So I had this kind of desk setup, and I was using, I would use whatever DAW the studio was comfortable with using because I work in a lot of different places. So, I started off using
emulating the analog tape workflow in a computer.
The analog workflow in that you've got all your input channels, and then you would have a number of group buses, and then you would have your master channel. And I would even put all of my auxiliary sends on every channel. So I would be able to easily and quickly grab a reverb whenever without actually having to break into my mix flow and click, add, send, a, bus, reverb, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Got it.
So that was the workflow I was using. And then I kind of came across Mixbus in its very early stages, back before the GUI redesign, Mixbus 2 or Mixbus 3 or something. And I sort of used it a little bit, and then I was working on Pro Tools a lot. And then I kind of re-encountered Mixbus a number of years ago and decided to move over most of my project work to that. It's not appropriate for certain things. It's not really appropriate for working with, sessions that have to be locked into another DAW. So sometimes I'll work in Logic because the client has Logic and uses Logic, and we need to work up to that stage. And then maybe I'll bounce out stems and sum them in Mixbus. Maybe there's a studio with Pro Tools HD or HDX or whatever the current generation is, and you would probably be a fool to walk into a studio that you didn't know and start kind of trying to track recording sessions in a piece of software that they've never used on their system. So quite often I'll be tracking in something else, and then I'll bring the files into Harrison Mixbus. But the studios where I work regularly, I have that rigged, and I will even sort of, if I know the system can handle it, I'll use that from the ground up rather than use a Pro Tools accelerated sort of setup.
Yes,
so the cool thing about Mixbus, the cool thing about Mixbus is that it gives me all of the. This is what you were asking, really, isn't it? It gives me EQ on screen for every channel at all times. It gives me dynamics for every channel at all times because it looks like a mixer. So I don't have to click into plugins, which is so slow. I mean, it's incredibly slow. You'll know this, mixing on a console. You can jump around and you can EQ one thing, and you can, immediately jump to compression on the kick drum, and then you can go between the vocal, you can balance these things which aren't really doable as easily if you have to go through a plugin, click, click, click. Even with a mouse, there is a delay, obviously, compared to a sort of an analog console or a physical controller. But it's just a really nice system, and it sounds great because it has saturation built into the buses,
doesn't it?
And that's what I think is the key thing about making a professional mixed gel, So so I found Mixbus again, and I've been working with them ever since, and they're so good to me. Ben and Mike, and they're just they're just the best people to work with. Absolutely the best people to work with. They look after me. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, fantastic. And you look well after them. I'm a Mixbus user as well, and I've been using it also since version 2. And look, I love that piece of software. It's really intuitive, and everything you just said really resonates very much with me. Yeah, nice.
So I was
nice.
talking to someone the other day about, I sat here at my console. I've got a TAC Matchless, which is one of the models from AMEC, a British manufacturer, and large format console. I'm sat right in front of it, and I'm looking at the EQ now, and the EQ has 6 knobs on it. And I've never mixed a record on this console and thought, oh, I need a more surgical EQ. It doesn't happen. If there's a problem with a particular track that does need some kind of graphic or very precise EQ, then I'd probably re-record that track, or I would probably fix it within the context of the computer. But for the actual mix process, I think less can be more, and you can sort of avoid doing lots of damage by having nice gentle EQ curves that can't really be cranked too much. And I think Mixbus translates that concept into the software world, whereas if you look at the standard stock EQ for most of the DAWs, you can really go to town on some sounds. And when I hear inexperienced engineers mixing on those workstations, you get all sorts of crazy problems which just wouldn't exist if they weren't given the tools to
using
ruin
way
this
too
sound.
many plugins.
Way too many plugins.
And I've seen that as well. Yeah.
I picked up a sort of a session off a friend of mine who's a producer who needed me to finish mixing a record for him because he was busy with another one, and great guy, but clearly he'd been mixing this project on headphones and probably or not a very great environment, and all the instruments had these crazy cuts in them. There's like these sort of dip EQs at really weird frequencies, and I just went in and bypassed all the EQ, and the whole thing just came to life so much more. So I think a lot of the time people are fighting things that don't exist because of monitoring issues. So something like a piece of software like Mixbus kind of stops you going crazy with the plugins, doesn't it?
Keeps you focused on what really counts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the vocal rides and stuff.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, levels and automation and compression are so much more useful than EQ, in my opinion. And my mixes, over the years, I use less and less EQ and less processing, and they sound better and better.
Same.
Hopefully.
Same. That's so true. Yeah. I was actually finishing a metal and rock album the other day and noticed that for the first time in probably forever, I actually used a compression ratio of 2:1. As extreme as 2:1. I'm a 1.3 to 1.5 person usually, and 1.7 when I get angry. And
so this reminds me a little bit of sort of tape compression and sort of the compression that you can either noise reduction technology or the compression that tape applies. That's one of the things I think that makes tape stuff sound so good, because if you hit it hard, then you get that gentle compression. If you hit it just the right level, you get that gentle compression, and it comes back in sounding kind of more ready, as it were.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean,
and it's a fine balance. If it's just a bit too much, then it can really break apart. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Good. Say, what's the situation currently in the UK? We all know about the pandemic and the havoc it has caused in the music industry. What's the situation over there?
Well, okay, as we're recording this, the news has just broken about the Prime Minister having attended a Christmas quiz party. So that's interesting. In terms of, and this is relevant, not just my political rant, it's very difficult because, for the past 2 years, we've kind of not, or nearly 2 years, we've kind of not really known what's going on. Bands are not able to tour. live music acts aren't really able to tour consistently. It's happened for a bit, but smaller bands that don't have that budget behind them have kind of stopped and put everything on hold, which means the recording industry has slowed down for a lot of people. Fortunately, it never really happened for me because I had so much on and so many kind of arms to what I do. I was able to focus on stuff that I was able to undertake. Studios were closed for a little while, and then because we can't complete that particular type of work from home, we were allowed to go back into them. But yeah, I've not been away working in Europe for a while, obviously, and we had Brexit as well, which has caused all sorts of issues. But I've got a session on Saturday. So yeah, in 2 days' time, I've got another record on between Christmas and New Year. So things are happening.
That's good.
It's all very tentative. Yeah, I mean, it might get cancelled at any point, but who knows?
Okay. So business is basically back there, but on a lower level at this stage.
Yeah, definitely.
And what's the tendency? Is it coming back? Are gigs coming back, or are people still locked away?
They were, and then we've. I think people have become more frightened over Christmas. So, there are gigs running, and they're using the COVID passport system just to make sure everyone's vaccinated and logged.
That's quite similar to what we see over here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think with the smaller artists, there is a risk that one person getting sick will cause the whole 14, 15 people on a particular tour to have to sacrifice the rest of that tour and cancel. So I was talking to a friend of mine who's a professional musician at sort of medium to high level, and he was saying he's basically very nervous about this whole thing. They're going to continue their tour, but as soon as someone gets sick and they have to cancel all remaining dates in the tour, then it could be a major issue. But yeah, I mean, I think there's nothing we can do about this. So I think embracing other forms of technology is a really good way to operate. So you've seen Audio Movers has hit the big time recently, and we've been working in the industry remotely for years and years, haven't we? Firing WAV files to each other on. That's
right. Can you just explain what Audio Movers is? Not everybody may know. What that is.
Yeah. Should I? Right. Okay. So Audio Movers, there are a few ways of piping audio in a relatively live manner around the internet. Audio Movers is a company that released a plugin called Listen To, I think it was.
Yes.
And there are two forms of this plugin. It's a subscription service. They have a server somewhere that sort of lets you. I think it's a server-based system rather than a peer-to-peer system. Not entirely sure. But they let you create a link that you can stream high-quality audio out of your DAW from wherever you drop that plugin. And you can send that link to your client, and the client can listen in a browser. Alternatively, the client can drop a plugin into their DAW, or anyone can drop a plugin into their DAW, put in the passcode, and then they can actually grab audio into their workstation live from you. So I tried this out with a friend of mine in who's based. I'm in the north of England, so she's based in London, and we managed to do some sort of backing vocals with over a backing track. So you can conduct.
Oh wow!
You can conduct live sessions.
Live recording sessions, effectively. Wow, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's not very good though. It's not a patch on something like Steinberg's Cubase Remote, whatever that's called. It's very complicated.
Yep.
So I don't know, have you used the Cubase remote recording setup?
I have not, no, but I've used audio movers myself and Source Connect and other solutions.
Yeah.
And obviously latency is usually the biggest problem.
Yeah, it's not ideal, is it?
Yeah, exactly. So in the end, usually we still exchange files forward and back via Dropbox or Google Drive and return WAV files of the same start point. That's an unbeatable system, but it just can't be done live. Yeah.
So the Cubase thing is definitely worth checking out if you're a Cubase user.
Okay.
And it's basically if you have a certain version of Cubase or something, and you can load basically the client or the talent or whatever it is, they download a very small application at their end, and it has very simple controls on it. So I think it's got like a reverb control, volume level of backing track, volume level of you, and it does a video link as well. And so you can kind of plug in and record whilst having a video conference with the producer, who might be thousands of miles away. And it does all the alignment for you. So everything it's not exactly real time, but it's like within a second or something. And then it will upload a temporary version to the producer, and then slowly upload the full version as you go along, which is a technique that I don't know if you've ever used Ohm Studio, which is fairly outdated now. That was Ohm Boys from they're a French programming company. And they kind of I think they sort of came across this idea first, but I don't think that it's like an online workstation. It's definitely worth checking out. Ohm Studio, OHM. If you have a computer that will run it, because it's 32-bit only, it's a sort of a web-based collaboration workstation, which is great fun. Maybe not ideal for professional use, though. It's worth having a play with. Some of your listeners are into that. Yeah,
it's quite amazing how in a time where the music industry is in somewhat crisis, how technology leaps forward, and suddenly we find ways to produce that were unthinkable before. And technologies like Zoom and audio movers, they just leap forward and become mainstream. It's great to see. In some ways,
absolutely. I think we were at the perfect. We're at the point where it hasn't been many years since we would have been able to cope in this way with a pandemic.
Yes.
So let's say 3 or 4 years ago, I don't think people would have all been working from home, just because of internet speeds and availability.
Yes.
But now everyone has that access, and we're also used to FaceTime calls or video calls on whatever platform.
And how is producing music different to as it was before? Do you see more of a blend of people recording parts at home and parts in the studio? Is that happening more often than before? How is producing music different now?
Yeah, I think it was always going that way. So I've had a few projects on, a few major projects on over the last year and a half that have consumed a lot of time. One, I was able to go and actually do a recording session on a boat in London in August last year. Yeah, and that was really weird. So we kind of all tested and made sure that we were trying to socially distance within this boat. Meanwhile, a storm. It was moored in Trinity Wharf, so it's not a sort of not a boat out at sea per se, but that was really interesting because there were risks involved, I think, but you have to kind of limit those risks and make sure everyone's sensible about testing and keeping in contact. We have an app that would alert you if you've been around anyone who's tested positive, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, things have kind of returned back to normal, but just at a slower rate. And, I will be in the studio with bands, but we're all very careful when we go in and who we interact with afterwards,
And is it more acceptable these days that parts of the music or sometimes entire albums are literally recorded at home? That was something people looked down on ages ago. Is this more acceptable in the UK these days, or does it happen more often?
I mean, I think the quality issue for let's say guitar playing is actually relatively similar. So the quality of maybe a guitar part DI'd and then reamped by me might be better than if the guitarist was in, because I'll have more time and less stress dealing with the guitarist. So if they can get a good clean recording, that's great, a good DI recording. You do lose that interaction with the loudness of an amp and micro feedback. So I'm quite into, for certain parts, having the guitarist stand next to the amp that is loud. But you don't need that for every guitar part on a record. So I think people have started to go that way. The only issue with that is it does require a level of technological understanding, which is why something like that Cubase type application, it takes away the stress from the artist. So when I'm in a studio with musicians, I don't want them to even notice that we're recording. I don't want them to know that I'm tuning drums or I'm moving microphones around. And, the experience should be of making music, and they should be wowed by what it sounds like, and they should not be stressed about any kind of
I get it. So
technological side issues.
Yeah. So if musicians record themselves at home, they basically need to spread their attention across playing an instrument, but also being a recording engineer and dealing with microphones and gain and operating a DAW and all of this. Does that take away from the musical performance in any way?
I think if you can make it as simple as you can, then that's the best way of doing it. I'm just having an issue with your podcasting thing here. Bear with me.
What's it doing or not doing?
Oh, I think it's just trying.
Funny story. At this time of our interview, we had a little internet glitch and the recording dropped out. So what do we do when a recording goes bad? We just stop, go back and start again. So let me just punch you in where Russell and I continued
it's just
our
the
conversation.
same as before. Once we're done, we just need to wait for the upload, and that's the trick. Cool.
So
where were we?
Well, we were talking about things that have happened during the lockdown, and I kind of moved. So obviously I do a lot of educational stuff and motivational work in terms of, trying to help people become the best producers or engineers or work effectively within the industry. And I actually launched a coaching program 6 months ago, which was a sort of how to be the best model of yourself as a producer, or a songwriter or a performer or whatever it is in the industry. So I did that through my company, Recording Studio Masterclass. So recordingstudiomasterclass.co.uk. And we've been running coaching sessions weekly. We do like a weekly seminar with a guest. We've had all sorts of people like, Muse's producer and John Cornfield, and the lovely Ian Shepherd. You'll all know Ian from
he's a legend.
Production Advice.
He's got a great podcast as well. It's a bit technical, so not maybe everybody's cup of tea, but it's
the
very
mastering
technical. Show. It's the mastering show, and he's just a genius in his own way, and a true gentleman.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the weekly seminars are great. So we do a Monday at midday, just to sort of kick off the week, and we'll do either sort of tutorials on a specific thing, or we'll have a guest on. The manager of a big London studio, for instance, or a session musician, or a songwriter, or someone who's working in the industry. Usually just a load of my friends, and we just have a nice cup of tea and, and chat. And then I do a one-to-one with the students during the week, and just, you know what, it's so rewarding to see like the progress that they've made as well, either technically or just in confidence, in terms of, yes, I can do this, yes, I should be speaking to these people, because I think there is no, especially in the COVID world, there is no kind of studio system like there used to be, the T kind of or sort of tape op role.
Yes.
It doesn't really exist exactly anymore in most studios. So people kind of miss out and don't know how to access, like, how do you find a label? How do you talk to a music library? Who is good? Who is not? Who's like, how does PRS work? All those kinds of things, as well as this is how you write a vocal. The sort of stuff things that we cover. So I've kind of really diverted my attention more into education as well over the pandemic, because people have got a lot of time as well at home now.
That's so true.
Just
Look, that's absolutely fantastic. I've got a passion for passing on my knowledge as well, and it's great to see that you do that as well. And so besides being a record producer and recording engineer and mix engineer, you run your educational courses, and you are also the head of recordproduction.com. And you've got quite a successful YouTube channel.
I'm not the head of recordproduction.com.
Oh, sorry, but I thought, you're the mastermind behind it.
No, not at all. Okay, he's a very secretive man, the guy who runs it. So,
I just saw your face all over it.
Oh, no. Recordproduction.com is a really interesting story. I started working for the site. I say working for the site. I'm not paid. It's more of a social, we have events that we run, and we don't turn a profit on it at all. So recordproduction.com is run by a guy called Mike Banks, who is a salesman for Solid State Logic. He kind of, one year he decided, this is 20 odd years ago, he decided that instead of using the normal budget for entertaining producers for a dinner party kind of schmooze thing, he'd ask his boss if he could hire some minis. I think it was minis, small cars, and have a rally drive to France and drive around Paris, or I don't know whether they got the ferry over and drove around. Anyway, one way or other. And he had all this video footage, and he was like, what am I going to do with this video? How do I share this video footage with the producers who were there? So, I mean, this is the thing. So SSL have this really great approach, and you'll know this because you've been involved with them, but they don't need to sell their desks. They don't need to advertise their consoles to you, because you already want them, because they are so good. Mm-hmm. So really their marketing approach is just interacting with people and being cool. That's how it runs. So anyway, Mike set up this website, recordproduction.com, to share the videos. Things have moved down the line, nearly 20 years later. And most of the content's moved over to YouTube, and we go out and interview people and do features. We had a little TV series on Sky during the pandemic. And yeah, it's such a great site to look at, and a great channel to follow on YouTube. We've just had a site overhaul. So in the last 2 days, the new website has been released, which I think looks beautiful. So get yourselves over to recordproduction.com and you can see my face. And
definitely. It's a great website.
A few more attractive and cooler members of the team as well.
Well, I really enjoyed your interview with Sylvia Massey. Whoa, what a legend.
She's a wonderful. Yeah. I mean, I mean, what can I say? She's great. She's great. Yeah. So, I got a lot of information from her actually, which I thought was great, and just seeing how people work. And just, do you know what? Going into, I think it was Edge Studios in Cheshire. So, and I've worked there before, and I walked into that studio. It's an old milking parlor converted on a farm, and just the sheer power of the sound coming through the doors, because it's not like a proper studio build. Much as it's a great place to record, the doors are still thin doors, and it's not really like a ground up studio build, but just the power of these guitar cabs. Just she records loud. Let's put it that way. Goodness me. And it was nice to see that she was doing some techniques that I'd sort of independently discovered as well, which I think was really cool. So one of the things that she never talks about, the pickle trick.
Yes.
You have to use a solid state amplifier to do the pickle trick.
Okay.
Otherwise you'll blow your tubes.
Yeah,
it
right.
will, but you will probably end up causing a short eventually, and then the valves.
I think that's something we need to explain, because the pickle trick.
The pickle trick.
What's the pickle trick?
I think she was using cheese actually. When
she tried all kinds of things.
When I saw it. So the pickle trick is you have a guitar signal going through a solid state amplifier, and she was using a PA amp. That kind of just a normal kind of rack mount amp, and on the way to the speaker, on one of the wires, you cut that wire, not while it's running. You cut that wire and you attach. I think she attaches it to nails, right? And then you put one nail in, like carpentry nails, one in one end of a pickle and one in the other end, and then as the guitarist plays, the signal goes through the pickle. Just to be perfectly
clear, we're not talking about some kind of sound tool that is coincidentally called a pickle. It's an actual edible pickle. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah. So a pickled gherkin, or a pickled cucumber, or or a piece of cheese. Or she has this other thing as well that she has like she'll get a socket for a piece of. So she'd been to a charity shop and bought a load of old bits of like just tat, basically. So an old fan and an old telephone and all sorts of rubbish. But I think she had a fan running, and I'm sure she had a socket, and she was running the guitar signal through the fan before it got to the speaker. It was
crazy.
Yeah.
She absolutely has no rules or limits. Everything is possible for her. And when the signal passes through the pickle does actually sound come out the speaker, yeah? And
it doesn't sound good.
No,
that's the thing. It's like kind of. So yes, it's a non-achievable sound. Basically, you can't get that sound because again, you'll never get it again exactly, and you can't. There could be a plugin that does it, but that takes some of the experience away from it. And I think, like, I have a very similar opinion. Like, when you're making a record, the experience of the artist whilst making the record is probably as important as the actual recording, because it will make them play differently. Yeah, so that's why I say they shouldn't be tired. They shouldn't experience. They shouldn't even know when a cable goes down. They shouldn't know when there's a problem with the desk. And I have a couple of really good assistants who work with me from time to time, if there's a budget on that specific record, and their role amongst engineering as well, is one of us has to entertain the artist whilst we're fixing issues, because there will be issues in a recording studio. There's thousands and thousands of wires, and bits of tech, and there's going to be a problem at some point. So, if you've got an assistant who knows when to say, "Hey, let's go and make a cup of tea. Oh, should we all go out for coffee for half an hour?" Whilst Russ is frantically panicking, trying to resolder a broken microphone or something, or vice versa. That's a really good skill to have, it's about reading people, as much as reading technical manuals.
That's so true. I can really see this, in front of my eye. That would be some kind of an effortless flow state like experience for the musician.
Hopefully.
That really resonates with my view of how a recording session should be, in all honesty.
Yeah, because
it doesn't have to be hard. It should be easy. It should be.
It should be. And microphones, if you want a good sound, put a microphone in front of something that sounds good, because microphones are generally pretty good now. So, that's it. It's not complicated. I have started using just a single U67. U67 on guitar cabs recently. So a lot of my heavy guitars, I don't even record with a dynamic right up against the grill. No, I just put a microphone, a big large diaphragm condenser microphone, about a meter away from a 4x12, and it sounds insanely good. Do you know why it sounds good? It sounds good because the speaker cabinet sounds good, and the amp sounds good, and the guitar going into it sounds good. But most importantly, the playing is good of a good song.
Yes,
because
that's
no
where the money is.
No one's stressing. None of the listeners are stressing about, I want this to be like, they want to hear the sound of the instrument and everything to sound great, and they want to hear the vocal, and they want to just get excited about the music, and they want to dance or rock their feet or whatever. But no one's really caring about whether you put 1.5 decibels or 1.8 decibels of gain at 10k with a Q of 0.8. No one cares about that. Is the song good or is the song not good? Is the arrangement good? I've just done a course. I've just released, I'm just about to release a course called Analog Mixing Basics, which is like a video course where I go through mixing a record. And I think there's, and all the skills that you need and all the techniques that you can use, even if you've only got one bit of gear and a 2-in 2-out interface, or if you've got one of those little desktop mixers with one fader on, you can still mix analog. And I think like the thing that really comes across in that, I was just reviewing the edit yesterday, and the thing that really comes across in that is like I'm dancing around and I'm throwing auxiliary sends, and I'm kind of getting down and enjoying the music. And there are, in the multi-track, there's an element of scrappiness to the timing of the backing vocal. But we didn't fix that because it's about the experience of that music, and it worked in that situation. And the song is so good, it doesn't need to be, gridded, and it doesn't need all those things. And I think that's one of the important things to remember, is that, you don't have to kind of go crazy in that respect. So
I'm so with you on this.
That's my general sort of
it's the little imperfections in music that make it really lovable. And if music is too perfect, it gets boring to my ears. Yeah.
So to me, the timing is really important. And yes, you can drop things to a grid, and working to a click is great and everything, because it means that you can play around that timing. But I think if you've got a good song and it's arranged well, mixing doesn't doesn't have to be difficult. Like mixing is easier with a better arrangement because the parts that that you have to mix together kind of already gel. And that's a very big difference between actually, people writing properly and sort of desktop music. Because if you haven't been in a room together and played the music together, it's often much more difficult to make sure you know how the arrangement's going to work, whether to drop that acoustic guitar out to single chords, one, a dime kind of one note per bar, and when to sort of bring the electric guitars back in, and when to move over to your China cymbal instead of your crash, and all those things, that you only really get when you're actually putting the musicians together. So, I mean, at the risk of rambling...
even then, it probably needs to ripen for a while, and they need to record themselves on a phone and listen back and realize, what I tried didn't work. And, it goes through the cycle of trying things and listening back and, fine-tuning. And that's where a lot of the magic is coming from,
Yeah, and as a producer, like you'll know this, you become so used to listening to demos and knowing what they're going to sound like in the end. The quality of the demo recording is irrelevant. It's all about that music. That's why people listen to bootlegs. Bootleg recording. I've got some sort of Jimi Hendrix box set of all these like dodgy recordings that were made from gigs by audience members, and it's brilliant. It doesn't make it not good because of that issue, Yeah, so I think that's a really important thing to remember. Definitely.
Okay. Look, let me challenge you with a question. Of a different nature. If you just think back about your early days of being a producer, before you developed all of this wisdom, have you ever received any really bad advice that you figured out later was bad advice, something that one shouldn't do as a young engineer?
Well, first of all, you don't need to back it up.
You don't need to back it up, you said?
That would be bad. That would be bad advice.
That would be terrible advice.
You always need to.
That would be terrible.
Don't worry about it. Okay. The hard drive won't fail. It'll be fine. Oh goodness, I don't know really. I think what would So yeah, that's a really... Oh yeah, okay. So here's some bad advice. I was doing a session once for somebody else, and they said, "I want everything that leaves this studio to sound professional." And the project was, I was covering... Someone was ill, and it wasn't something that I would normally do. But I was covering another... it was the house engineer was ill. And it was some kind of school project band, which is, the kind of thing. They'll book the studio, and they all have to get there. We have an exam that you do when you're 16 here called GCSEs, and it was like music GCSE. Everyone needed a demo reel, that kind of thing, and the studio owner was like, no, everything has to be perfect before it leaves. Of course, that's not appropriate for an exam because it's meant to be a recording of what they've done. And I think that's kind of bad advice in a way, because I think, pushing things too far can actually cause an artist to not develop. So, yes. To see a development between your records is a really good and really satisfying thing. Ambition, you can make a really great record, even if you can't sing fantastically, but you just have to embrace what you can do fantastically, and you can be not so ambitious. And then as you develop and push forward, it's nice to see an artist sort of progress.
Yeah,
and
got it.
And I think so. I think that's it. That's probably one bit of advice, but
nice. And what's the best advice you've ever received?
Always back it up. Always back it up. And
nobody should need that advice. Everybody should know that anyway.
Back up multiple drives, different locations.
The best teacher is literally to once lose files. You know,
do you know what?
If it happens to you once, you'll never ever skip the backup again.
Well, I think you have to appreciate as well that all hard drives will fail at some point in time. So that's a. But I mean, on a less sort of silly and nerdy aspect, a good piece of advice. Oh goodness. Well, I think just to understand what your client is after. And not try and make the record that you want to make the record that they want to make with you. Because you can quite often get some multi-tracks and then go off on one. I've turned this into a synthwave remix, and actually what they were after was an English country dance.
Okay.
Kind of,
got it.
Sort of record with recorder and fiddle, and you've turned it into a dubstep, 12-inch or something, So sort of thinking about what's appropriate for the record, and so I actually studied media at university. Majoring in sound recording, but a lot of my time was spent looking at media theory and the production of products. And I think that is really important as well, to make sure a record is not a record if it is not released. If it's still sat on your hard drive 10 years later, it's not a record, is it? So
that's true.
So, releasing a product on time and on budget is possibly the most important thing. Yep. So people ask me, what does a producer do? And they expect me to say, I'm really going to take your vision and, we're going to translate that into a most wonderful top selling blah, blah, blah. And we're going to really, get the emotion out of you and all this kind of stuff. But that's all secondary. The primary thing is this record going to get made, and is it going to be good?
Yes.
So that's the sort of the nuts and bolts of it, and then all the rest of actually making the record that they want to make, and then making the record that I want to make. On top of that is like icing on the cake.
So as a self-producing musician, a lot of people don't have the advice from somebody like yourself or another person to say, okay, it's good enough, send it out. So have you got any advice how to sort of not to overproduce it, not to get caught into this loop where you produce an album for 20 years and never finish? Yeah. How do you know when a song is finished without having that interaction?
Okay, so I mean, this is one of the things that I was one of the reasons why I've done this analog mixing basics course is that back in the day when I had 16 tracks of tape and I could maybe add keyboards if I striped one of those tracks with time code, and then I could kind of link the time code to the computer to do MIDI sequencing, etc., etc. That's 15 tracks of audio. And that's it. And, 8 of those are going to be on your drums probably. So there was a physical limit to the technology that we could use. And yes, you could spin in sound effects and stuff off 1/4 inch or off CD or off DAT or whatever live and try and get the mix, do that every time you did a mix bounce. But having a limit to the amount of tracks you use, I think, is a really great way to not mess around too much. And using analog, if you've got a little desk and you go, okay, I'm going to do my mixing on this little desk, console, as some of your listeners will what do you say there? Is it desk or console?
Oh, we use either here. Console, desk, mixer, everything goes.
That's good. So yeah, using hardware is quite a good way to limit what you can do, but also it focuses you a little bit because you don't go off on a tangent and then, I could add I could have 3 compressors on this snare drum to make it sound fatter. Or it's like, no, stop it. It's nobody listens back to, okay, I grew up listening to new metal. So I'm that age. Nobody goes back and goes, oh, that Korn record sounded rubbish. Well, it kind of isn't what you would expect from an album now. But it had this power to it. You know, the first album had this power to it, and the drums sound what we would consider not to be a great recording. But now, like, if you look back on it, no one was going, oh, those drums don't sound powerful. But now I'll listen to modern records of the same sort of genre, or even the same band, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's okay, but it doesn't have that to it, you know? And I think part of that is that there's this infinite amount of messing around you can do. So if you kind of limit yourself to, say, 16 tracks or 24 tracks, and you use 2 reverbs and a delay on an auxiliary, set up your console, set up your workstation, your DAW, like a console, like an analog studio, you can achieve those same things. It's okay to edit, that's fine, but you know what? Like if you're editing and editing and editing and editing and editing, and if it's taking more than a day to edit a track, then you probably should just record it properly.
Yes,
it's a difficult. Or the other option is speak to a producer, because there are loads of producers across the world, myself included, who will take on projects from independent artists. Do you know, like Andrew Sheps, for instance? I was astonished to see the kinds of artists, the kind of indie ground level artists that he works with, and then he'll go off and do a Metallica record, or, you know, he's mixed Adele or the Beastie Boys and Michael Jackson he's worked with, and all these amazing artists, and then he's working with a little band from, you know, Wales or something, and it's not an insurmountable issue to actually go and pay a producer for a day or something to get some advice. I think like that is a really worthwhile task. Really worthwhile routes to go down.
Good. And say if, you know, one of the listeners now feels like reaching out to you and learning more about what you could do, what's the best way to find you?
My name is really unique, so you can pretty much Google that, and unless it's a microbiologist, you've probably found something that I'm doing anything about audio. So they can search russellcottier.com is my website, my production website. If you want to check out recordproduction.com, I'm on there as well. I have an electronics, electronics company called, I've got a YouTube channel under my name, and then obviously recordproduction.com. Where else? Oh yeah, we've got Ruco, which is rucoproaudio.com, which is my electronics company. That's RUCO proaudio.com, where we make control surfaces and things. Very cottage industry, but fun. And if you want to learn stuff, go to recordingstudiomasterclass.co.uk. You don't have to be from the .co.uk area to go on that site and benefit from it. We do like online courses and all sorts of stuff. So
that's fantastic. If you're okay with that, I'd like to put all of these links into the show notes.
Absolutely.
So that everybody could just scroll down and find you there.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, come find me. Come say hello. I'm on some of the social medias, and I occasionally reply to answers, but YouTube is a really good place to find me.
We had, long discussions on Facebook before and Messenger, and it's great to finally speak in person. That's really good.
Absolutely. And yourself, yeah. I mean, Mixbus users will know me off the Mixbus Pro users group on Facebook.
You're the face of Mixbus.
I'm there shouting at evangelizing. That's what I'm doing. But it's right. It's whatever works for the. If you love Pro Tools and it works for you, then that's great. If you love Ableton or whatever, then absolutely fantastic. The reality is the tools don't make the record. the tools are just tools for making the record.
That is so true. That's fantastic, wise words to finish up this episode, I reckon. Russell, thank you so much for making time for us and for having this, fantastic conversation. I really love that. It's literally the last episode before Christmas, so I'm going to go on Christmas break. So Merry Christmas to you. I hope you get a bit of a break. And
Happy winter for all.
We've got summer here, so I spend a lot of time at the beach with my kids and walking the rainforests and so on.
Well, we had storms, so.
Oh, gee. I don't miss the cold. I used to live in Hamburg, so I know exactly what the weather's like there. I don't miss it at all. Russell, thank you so much. Yeah?
Cool. I will hopefully see you again soon.
Yeah, I'll see you soon. Thanks, mate.
Bye.
Wow, thank you so much, Russell. So much insight, so many great thoughts. I really like your attitude towards music production and your attitude towards life. And thank you so much for sharing all this amazing information with me and all of my listeners. Thank you so much. It's time to finish up this episode, so let me just quickly remind you that I'm going on a little Christmas break. So for the next few weeks there will be fewer episodes. We will probably drop a mini-sode here or there, but the Production Talk podcast will continue at the end of January. I also would like to remind everybody quickly that there is still a giveaway to be won. So if you want to win the big prize, which is a mix from me for you, then you need to just go to the show notes and click your way through. So it's a big prize. It's something that you don't want to miss out on. So make sure to check out the show notes and enter your name into the competition. Okay, I wish you best of luck with this. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year. I'll see you on the other side. This is the end of the last episode of the Production Talk podcast for 2021. Speak to you next year. Bye for now.